last time we met, Yahuah was giving Moshe instructions for the construction of the Ark of the Testimony, or commonly called the Ark of the Covenant. And we looked deep into the meaning of the words contained in the instructions, and we saw a lot of actions and activities of Messiah. We saw a lot of prophecy as it pertains to Yasharel and what was to come of them. And we also saw a lot of clues on how we are supposed to be living our lives, clinging to Yahuah and his word in both the times of joy and plenty and in the times of distress. And one of the last things Yahuah told Moshe pertaining to the ark's construction is that he shall put into it the testimony which he, Yahuah, shall give him. Yahuah Yareh, or Yahuah Ra'ah, provide, tend to, or Yahuah will see to it. Now, Yahuah has provided everything that we receive in life, good or bad, for us. What you do with it, good or bad, that turns into your testimony. Let's look at Genesis 2:7, and it says, "And Yahuah Elohim formed man of the dust of the ground," that word is Adamah, means soil or earth, "and Naphah, or breathe, into his nostrils the neshma of life, and man became a living soul." At this moment, Adam was given a gift, the gift of life. Now, question, was the earth alone able to give Adam this gift? And the answer would be no. Many give Adam flack because of the garden incident. But in actuality, Adam performed his function. Remember, the first instruction he was given, that occurred in Genesis 1:28. And it reads, "And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." And Adam did that. In fact, he doubled up and placed in them the gift that Yahuah first gave him. Let's look at Genesis 4, and it reads, "And Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from Yahuah. And she again bare his brother Habel." And what did they do? Well, the text says that Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of ground. Now, if we look deeper into this, keeper is Ra'ah, like Yahuah Yareh or Yahuah Yarah. And it means to tend to a flock, to graze, rule, associate with, friendship, pastor, etc. And I broke down sheep in a previous lesson, but for those who were not there, sheep here is Sion, and it means a collective name for a flock of sheep or goats. But it can also be a collective name for men or a flock of men. All right? So spiritually, Abel provided for, tended to, had friendship towards mankind, who was of his same fold. Now, Cain or Cain was a tiller of the ground. And tiller here is abad, which means to work, to serve or be in service to, or worship the Adamah, the ground, which is the Hebrew word, as I pointed out, for soil or earth. All right. There we go. Again, the earth alone or by itself, it's not able to bear fruit, if you would. Let's look at Matthew 25:14. It says, "For the kingdom of Shamayim is a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to the other 2, and to another 1. To every man according to his several," and that means individual, "ability, and straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained another 2 or other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the Adamah, or earth, and hid his master's money." So he took his 1 talent, literally, and digged it in the earth. Now, digged here is oruso in the Greek, and it means to burrow. And it's good when you are in the Brit Hadashah, or the New Testament, to try and trace these words back to Hebrew. Now, remember, the New Testament is all Yasharel dealing with Yasharel. Now, in Hebrew, this word is H3738 kara, and it means to dig, plot, bore, open, or make a banquet. So again, spiritually, he took his 1 talent and literally immersed it in the earth. By the way, kara, as we see here, it is the kaf, the resh, and the hay, which means blessing of the first ruler revealed. So after we take our last breath and we are at the judgment, what will be said of us and what we did with the blessing / testimony that Yahuah has placed in us? Side note, and really it's an additional note, kara, this word that we're looking at, it can also mean blessing of the first ruler's breath. It all comes full circle. Think about that. This week, we are in Exodus, or Shemot 25, and I will be reading verses 17 through 22. And it reads, "And thou shalt make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1.5 cubits the breadth thereof. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them, in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And make 1 cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end. Even of the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubim, or cherubims, on the 2 ends thereof. And the cherubim shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings. And their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubims be. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above upon the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I shall give thee. and there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubims which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the children of Yasharel. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Now, mercy seat, it is the Hebrew word keperet, and it means lid. Now, contrary to popular belief, there is no seat or throne on this lid. Now, the AHLB says that keperet, that the action is to cover. All right. Concretely, it is a lid, and abstractly or abstract is atonement. All right. Now, the mercy seat is also not a place or an item that you would go to for mercy. Mercy is H2617, and it is chesed. All right, and it means kindness, piety, reproof, beauty. And the action is to bow, and the abstract is kindness. All right. Now, Hebraically, chesed is the het, the samach, and the dalet, which means separated or the separated or fence that supports the door. The Hebraic action behind mercy is that it is favor or kindness showed to one that is separated or set apart in doing the commandments, hence the piety portion of the definition. Now, mercy is often confused for, but it does work in conjunction with grace. Now, grace is H2580 hen. All right, and it means graciousness, kindness, favor, beauty, all similar to hesed or mercy. The AHLB says the action and the concrete is camp, as in like a camp, and the abstract is beauty. Hebraically, hen is the het and the noon, and it means separation or continuance of or for the seed. As it pertains to what we are reading, the mercy seat or keperet does not trace directly to mercy or grace at all. Its connection is implied or indirect. The mercy and or grace that is afforded to the set apart seed, and that is the catch, is in the action, which was covered. Let's look at Hebrews 3, and we're going to do 1 through 6. It says, wherefore, Kodesh, or holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest of our profession, Mashiach Yahusha, who was faithful to him that appointed him, as also Moshe was faithful in all his house. For this man was counted worthy of more esteem than Moshe, inasmuch as he who hath builded the house hath more honor than the house. For every house is builded by someone. That word man does not exist. If you click on some, you will see some or any person. So this would be for every house is builded by someone, but he that hath built all things is Elohim. And Moshe verily was faithful in all his house as a servant for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken after. but Mashiach as son over his house, whose house we are, or are we, if we hold fast the confidence and the rejoicing of the hope firm unto the end. Now, hope here is expectation, all right? So it's not hope like like we're taught in the West. It is an expectation. But the question we want to ask ourselves is, what is this calling or this profession, our profession? Let's look at Exodus 19:6, and it says, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, a Kodesh nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Yasharel. And we know this is Yah speaking to Moshe. And the other thing, what was the things which were to be spoken, or what was to be spoken after? And for that, we can look at Deuteronomy 18:18. And again, Yah is speaking to Moshe, and he says, I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto thee, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. Now, a couple of things when we're looking at this, looking at Hebrews, these Kodesh brethren, Kodesh means to be set apart. So these are set apart brethren, right? And they are partakers of the calling of the Shamayim, or the heavenly calling, what they were ordained to do, which we saw in Exodus 19:6. And they say, consider the apostle. The apostle is a messenger or a delegate, an ambassador of the good news or the message, right? And they also call Mashiach Yahusha the high priest of our profession. If they're calling him the high priest and they're speaking of their profession, then we know that they are priests as well. Let's look at Hebrews 4:14-16. It says, seeing then that we have a great high priest that has passed into the Shamayim, or the heavens, Yahusha, B'nai Elohai, or son of Elohim, B'nai Elohim, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Now, we already looked at grace and mercy, and we know that these are things that are afforded to the set-apart seed, right? But let's look at something else. These verses, it's a comparison and a contrast that's being made. And I say unto you that this last verse, 16, is an instruction on how to request something that they are lacking or in need of. The brethren are telling us that they have and have encountered within themselves maladies and weaknesses. And this is shown in the contrast of Yahusha, the high priest, being all points tempted like they were, with maladies and weaknesses just as they are, but he was without sin. So what they are saying, if you remember the definitions, is that his piety, remember the definition for mercy, or piousness that he possessed, enabled him to achieve this. Therefore, let us come boldly unto the throne. The brethren are in need of and requesting the ability, the kindness to be pious as Yahusha was. And this can only be achieved by approaching the throne. Now, I touched on that because we were here, but what I really came here for was throne. And throne is the Greek word thronos, all right? And it means a stately seat, a power, a potentate, sovereign, or a ruler. And these are all true statements, but the Greek definition, it subtly gives an incorrect perception of what the Hebraic understanding of a throne is. Let's look at the duty of a king. And we're going to read verse 18. It says, "And it shall be when he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write him a copy of this law in the book out of that which is before the priest, the Levites." Now, throne here and throughout the whole Tanakh is kaseh, and it means a covered item. All right? And the AHLB says the action is to cover, and concretely it means a cup. And it says the seat is like a cup that holds, conceals a person, a covering of something, or to cover by counting. Let's look at Matthew 20:20. "Then came to him the mother of Zebedee's children with her sons, worshiping him and desiring a certain thing of him. And he said unto her, What wilt thou? She saith unto him, Grant that these my two sons may sit, the one on thy right hand and the other on the left, in thy kingdom. But Yahusha answered and said, Ye know not what ye ask. Are ye able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They say unto him, We are able. And he saith unto them, Ye shall indeed drink of my cup, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared of my Father." Let's hop back to Exodus 25. The purpose of the mercy seat can be seen here in Exodus 25:22, which we read. It says, I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubims. By the way, since we are here, I want to remind you or reiterate that Yahuah says, you shall put in the ark the testimony that I give you. All right. I point this out because commandment in verse 22, it's not dabar like the 10 debarim. It is savah, which means to constitute, to enjoin, sort of like the action of a covenant. But it can also mean charge, give, send a messenger, put, or set in order. Now, as far as I know, there is only one recorded instance of Yahuah communing with Moshe from the mercy seat, and it can be found in Numbers 7:89. And when Moshe was going into the tabernacle of the congregation to speak with him, then he heard the voice of one speaking unto him from off the mercy seat that was upon the ark of the testimony, from between the two cherubim or cherubims, and he spake unto them. The mercy seat is utilized for another purpose that we don't see in Exodus. For that, we'll need to look at Leviticus, and we're going to do 16, verse 1 and 2. And it says, and Yahuah spake unto Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aharon, when they offered before Yahuah and died. And Yahuah said unto Moshe, speak unto Aharon thy brother, that he come not at all times into the Kodesh place within the veil before the mercy seat which is upon the ark, that he die not. For I will appear in the cloud upon the mercy seat. Now, the time appointed for the high priest to enter the Kodesh place is the Day of Atonement. And before doing so, the high priest would need to sacrifice a bullock for himself and his house, and also a goat for the people. And Aharon, this is Leviticus 16:11, shall bring the bullock of the sin offering, which is for himself, and shall make an atonement for himself and for his house, and shall kill the bullock of the sin offering, which is for himself. Verse 14, and he shall take of the blood of the bullock and sprinkle it with his finger upon the mercy seat eastward. And before the mercy seat shall he sprinkle the blood with his fingers 7 times. Then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering that is for the people, and bring his blood within the veil, and do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bullock, and sprinkle it upon the mercy seat and before the mercy seat. He shall make atonement for the Kodesh place because of its uncleanliness, the children of Yasharel because of their transgressions and all their sins. So shall he do for the tabernacle of the congregation that remaineth among them in the midst of their uncleanliness. And there shall be no man in the tabernacle of the congregation when he goeth in to make atonement in the Kodesh place, until he come out and have made an atonement for himself and for his household and for all the congregation of Yasharel. Putting this all together, the mercy seat is where Yahuah will commune with Moshe and later on the high priest. It is also the place where the blood for atonement is placed for the covering of the high priest and the children of Yasharel. This in turn shows us that a throne or a seat, concretely described as a cup, and the one who occupies it is supposed to be a seat that is responsible for and for the covering of its subjects. 1 Peter 1:19-21, but with the precious blood of Mashiach, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot, who verily was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you, who by him do believe in Elohim, that raised him up from the dead and gave him esteem, that your faith and expectation might be in Elohim. When the set apart approaches the throne of favor in need of kindness or ability to be pious, it is afforded to them because of the act of covering or atonement performed by the one, our high priest, who has the authority and is the extension of the one who occupies the throne, Yahusha Ha'Mashiach. Revelations 12:11, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Is everyone still with me? Give me a thumbs up if you're still with me. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Let's jump back to Exodus 25. And we see here, Moshe is also informed and instructed that the mercy seat shall have 2 cherubims made onto each end of it. They shall be facing each other with their wings stretched forth on high, covering the mercy seat. Now, cherub here in verse 19 or 18, either or, is the Hebrew word cherub, all right? And it comes from the Akkadian word karabu, which means to bless or one who blesses. Here, it means a created spiritual being having various descriptions, or a spiritual being created for a discrete purpose, thus differing from other cherubim in this manner. I find the wording of these definitions to be extremely interesting. Now, I assume everyone here understands the difference between the physical and the spiritual. And I'm also assuming that everyone understands Genesis chapters 1 and 2 and how Elohim first created man. I say this, if you look at the first definition, I say this because if one would attempt to describe what man is, I believe it would be safe to say that man is a created spiritual being. Let's look at Genesis 2, verse 7. And Yahuwah formed man of the dust of the Adamah, and Napha, or breathed into his nostrils, the neshma of life, or breath of life, and man became a living soul. This neshma, you can see from the definition, is a puff, a wind, is akin to the ruach that we see in Genesis 1:2. Ruach means wind or breath. And it is what actually gave man life. Thus, man is first physical, then animated or given life by the spiritual. If you look in this top right corner, let's look at the second definition. I do not believe it would be a correct statement to say that man is a spiritual being created for a discrete purpose. Because of the placement of the word spiritual in the definition, I believe it would be a bit of a stretch in describing man this way. Now, cherub, Hebraically, it can also be broken down a couple of different ways. I'll give you two. The blessing of the first ruler secures the house, or the cup from the beginning secures the house. Here in Exodus, this is the first time we have had a mentioning of the cherubim in a long time. The last time they were mentioned was in the end of Genesis chapter 3, as Adam and Yahuwah are being expelled from the garden. And it says, and Yahuwah said, behold, the man has become one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, Yahuwah Elohim sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man and placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim, or cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Now, even though they are placed at the east of the garden, and that's a whole nother lesson in itself, I get this picture that the cherubim are attached to the garden, facing each other, guarding the way. But why the way? That's a plug for my Aki net now. We know and get information here that Adam was not created in the garden, but he was placed in the garden. And there he communed with Elohim. Shortly before this event, Adam's sin and atonement for that sin more than likely took place in the garden, because in verse 21, it tells us that Elohim clothed them with coats of skin, and then they were expelled. Question: does anyone here know the way to the tree of life? I ask because according to verse 22, if you eat thereof, you gain eternal life. Revelations 22:14, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. If you were in the last lesson I did, you may remember how I showed that the staves were representative of the sticks, of which there were 2 sticks. These 2 sticks would fit into the rings of the ark that were a sign or a seal, and these rings were in the 4 corners of the ark. The staves were to remain attached in the rings, in the corners, and to the ark, and would be used to lift up the ark, which contained the testimony that Yahuah will give therein. A few months back, one of our imams asked Goshen Group a question that kind of ties into what we are discussing. And the cherubim are very interesting as to what they actually are. But let's see if we can put a few things together and shed some light on it. Let's look at 2 Samuel 22, 7 through 11. It says, in my distress, I called upon Yahuah and cried to my Elohim, and he did hear my voice out of his temple, and my cry did enter into his ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of Shamayim moved and shook because he was wroth. There went up smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub and did fly, and he was seen upon the wings of the wind. Now, y'all don't make fun of me or laugh at me, but that last verse there, it kind of reminds me of Santa Claus. You know how Santa Claus rides on the reindeers and brings, well, you all know. Anyway, does anyone know what the true name for reindeer is? It's caribou.
Caribou.
Depending on where one lives, that may be pronounced caribou with a hard K, or charabou with a hard CH. But it's okay. Just stick with me. Let's look at Ezekiel 1. It says, now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, that I was among the captives by the river of, it's either Chebar or K-bar, depending on whether or not you use the hard K, that the Shama'ims were opened, and I saw visions of Elohim. Verse 4. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud and fire enfolding itself, and brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. And everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, and the soles of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides, and they had their faces. They 4 had their faces and their wings. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. They went everyone straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, the 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion, and on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Verse 13. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. Before we move on, I want to show you something. In verse 9. And it's probably in verse 12. Well, I'll double check it before we move on. It says they went everyone straight forward. Now, normally in Hebrew, when you see straight in the text, it means yashar, or it's the word yashar, as in like yasharel, straight path to El, or straight to El. That's normally what straight is, but for some reason here, and I've checked several Bibles to double check this word is Eber, from where we get the word Hebrew. Forward is panim, which means the face or before the face. And this last portion I didn't see until after I found these two, but where it says one, that's actually ish for man. So they went every Hebrew man before the face. And it's the same in verse 12. And they went every Hebrew man, or ish, Eber, panim. Anyway, Ezekiel continues in this chapter describing that he also saw wheels inside of wheels, and you can see that in verse 16 in his vision. And he also saw rings in verse 18, and that those rings were full of eyes. And the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels, and you can see that in verse 20. Let's look at Ezekiel 9. And we're going to do 2 through 4. And it says, and behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth toward the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn. If you don't know what a writer's inkhorn, it's literally a horn that contains ink, and it usually had a quill. It's what they would use in ancient times to have ink and write with. But the writer's inkhorn by his side, and they went in and stood beside the brazen altar. And the esteem of Elohim, of Yasharel, was gone up from the cherub whereupon he was to the threshold of the house, and he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. And Yahuah said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. All right. Now, in verse 2, where it says, behold, 6 men came from the higher gate, and then it says, and one man among them was clothed in linen. I discussed this before, but that word among is very tricky when you're looking at it in the Bible. It can mean the centermost portion. It could mean in the midst of. It could mean one of, or it could mean with. 6 here, as it pertains to the 6 men, really holds no Hebrew significance. So I assume when it's saying this one man among them, this is probably an additional man, or the center point of the 6, sort of like a menorah, where you have the main stem in the middle and the 6 candelabras, or candle holders or cups, branch off from it. All right. And notice also in verse 3 that the esteem of Elohim was gone up from the cherub singular. In Ezekiel 10, Ezekiel has visions of the coals of fire. And if you remember my lesson about the sapphire stone, well, here in verse 1, it is reiterated. And we are told that it was above the head of the cherubim, and that there was the likeness of a throne. In verse 2, Yahuah speaks to the man clothed in linen and instructs him to fill his hand with coals of fire from between the cherubim and scatter them over the city. Verse 4, we are told again that the esteem of Yahuah went up from the cherub singular, but now he, or it, stood over the door of the house. In verse 6, Yahuah instructs the man in linen to take the fire from between the wheels and the cherubim. Verse 12, we are told again that the wheels were full of eyes. And verse 14, Ezekiel describes the beast again, and it says, and everyone had 4 faces. The first face was the face of a cherub, and the second face was the face of a man, and the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle, and the cherubim or cherubims were lifted up. This is the living creature that I saw by the river Kabar or Chabar. Wait a minute. Didn't Ezekiel say in chapter 1 that one of the faces was the face of an ox? Why does it say cherub here? He also says that this is the same living creature when he was describing it before that he saw at the river Chabar in chapter 1. And I personally think that this was done intentionally to confuse us. Nevertheless, we have other sources we can check. In Revelations 4, Yehukanan is having a vision of Shamayim and the throne. And in verses 6 to 11, it says, and before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal, and in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes, before and behind. And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf, and the third beast had a face of a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. Calf there is understood as ox as well. And the 4 beasts, each of them 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within. And they rest not day and night, saying, Kadash, 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 Yahuah Elohim Almighty, which was and is to come. And when those beasts give glory and honor and thanks to him that sat on the throne, who liveth forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him that sat on the throne and worship him that liveth forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Thou art worthy, O Yahuwah, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Now, what's interesting here, it says, when those beasts, speaking of the beasts with the 4 faces, give esteem and honor and thanks to him that sat on the throne, that the 24 elders fall down. And then in verse 11, he says, for thy pleasure they are and were created. Someone put in the chat, if you know the answer, who are those beasts? Who are the cherubim? Who do you think they are? Anyone? It looks like us. Came in a little late, Aki, but it's all right. It looks like us. Let's put a little icing on the cake. In the book of Bamidbar, that means in the wilderness, or as we know in the West, the book of Numbers, chapter 2. Moshe is instructed to number and arrange the tribes of Yasharel. The tribes, they will be ordered in 4 groups of 3 tribes with 1 leader tribe. They are all to pitch or camp by their own standard with the ensign of their father's house. Each tribe has a banner or an ensign, but what is to be displayed most prominent are the ensigns of the leader tribes. Yahuwah assigns the tribe of Judah in verse 3 to be on the east side. He goes on to tell them that Issachar and Zebulun will be under them. In verse 10, Reuben is to be on the south side, with Simeon and Gad under them. On the west, Ephraim, with Manasseh and Benjamin under them. North shall be Dan, with Naphtali and Asher under them. The tabernacle of the congregation, as well as the Levites, shall be in the midst, the middle, or central to them all. So our 4 leader tribes are Judah, Reuben, Ephraim, and Dan. And I'm going to move my screens real quick, so just bear with me. But when laid out according to Yahuwah's instruction, the formation of those tribes, they form a unique symbol that looks something like this. Can you guys see my screen?
God.
What symbol do you see? Anyone?
An X.
An X?
A plus?
Toda. In Hebrew culture, the cross has no significance. In fact, we're told several times in the Bible that Yahusha was hung on a tree or a stake. For us in our culture, this is nothing more than two sticks. In English, it's called the letter T. In Hebrew, this symbol or the letter T is understood to be one of two potential Hebrew characters or letters. It can be the Ta or the Tet. Now, Ta means a sign or a mark, and Tet means to surround, contain, or to be full of. In modern Hebrew, the Ta and the Tet looks like this. In Paleo Hebrew, the Ta and the Tet look like this. In ancient or pictographic Hebrew, they look exactly the same as Paleo. Now, the Bible is pretty vague on what the tribes' ensigns were, but most biblical scholars agree that Judah is a lion. Reuben's ensign was a man. Ephraim's ensign was an ox. And Dan was an eagle, sometimes depicted with a serpent in its mouth. Go figure. At its core, when the Most High considers Yasharel, he is considering them as a whole, or being akkad, or one nation. And if you understand the vantage point of Yahuah looking down on the tribes and all of the hundreds of thousands of Israelites, for him, the layout probably looks something like this. Remember the last time we met, we discovered that the rings that the staves or the sticks were to go into was to be considered as a sign, and that they were placed in the four corners of the ark. Furthermore, didn't we learn from Ezekiel's vision that the cherubim or the beast that had four faces was seen in conjunction with and or in the midst of wheels that had wheels inside of a wheel, and that they were full of eyes, and that they were living creatures whose likeness was sparkled like the color of burnished brass, and that their appearance was like burning coals of fire? Remember, Yahuah instructed the man clothed in linen and told him to go between the wheels and to fill his hand with the coals of fire and scatter them over the city. Remember, Yahuah instructed the same man who had the inkhorn to set a mark upon their foreheads and to smite everyone without the mark in the city. Later, Yahuah instructs the man in linen to gather up the coals of fire. And remember, before all of this, that the esteem of Yahuah went up from out of the cherub, singular, and stood over the threshold of the door of the house. Perhaps when Yahuah looked down upon the camp of Yasharel in the wilderness, and all of those eyes of all of those Israelites are fixed on high, and he beheld these living creatures in the midst of the symbol of a wheel, inside of a wheel full of eyes with the appearance of coals of fire, that he beheld something that looked like this. A bunch of eyes or coals of fire looking up at him. One more passage, Mishpacha, and I'll be out of your way. Let's go to Revelations 1:12. And I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one, like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters.
On another plane, elevating past the tricks you playing, meditate on the